Mistress seduces the millionaire while his pregnant wife is away. Never expected her sudden return. Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone's arrogance blinds them from seeing the truth right before their eyes? In today's story, a glamorous mistress mocks a humble wife for marrying what she calls a beggar, not realizing that the man she's sneering at is far from penniless. Beneath his worn-out clothes and soft-spoken manner lies a secret no one could have expected, an unsuspected wealth and influence that could change everything. And when karmic justice arrives, it spares no one from the harsh repercussions of pride. Buckle up for a tale of hidden identities, twisted loyalties, and unbelievable turnarounds. Layla adjusted the collar of her well-worn coat and took a deep breath before walking into the bustling market. Winter's cold breath coursed through the air, chilling her cheeks and stiffening her joints. Vendors from all walks of life had set up colorful stands that offered everything from fresh produce to aromatic spices, and the din of haggling customers created a lively background chorus. Layla swept a strand of dark hair behind her ear, reminding herself that frugality had become her daily companion and that she must keep her chin up no matter what. Her husband, John, walked beside her with steady composure. He was a slender man of medium height, wearing faded jeans with slightly frayed edges and a coat whose lining had seen better days. There was an inexplicable warmth that radiated from his eyes, kindness, patience, and a sincerity that made him instantly likable to others. Even in the face of financial challenges, he never seemed to lose hope or patience. Layla had been teased countless times about choosing to marry a man who seemingly had no prospects. Friends, especially those who considered themselves above Layla's station, looked at John's well-worn clothing and often sneered. But Layla was steadfast in her love. She recalled the day they first met, a chance encounter at the local library. Layla was struggling to afford a subscription to a language course, and John, a mere bystander, had offered to pay it without a second thought. That day, she had realized that wealth of the heart was just as if not more important than the thickness of one's wallet. Little did she know, that gesture was a small preview of John's hidden generosity. As the couple strolled through the market, Layla stopped to pick up a bag of apples, carefully searching for the ones on sale. At that exact moment, she heard a familiar laugh echo across the crowded lane. Her heart sank. She knew that laugh all too well. It belonged to Cassandra, a woman with fierce ambition and a well-known reputation for flaunting her lover's fortunes. Cassandra's entire persona oozed with the kind of aristocratic manner that made anyone who didn't meet her standards feel instantly small. When Layla turned, there stood Cassandra, exuding opulence with her meticulously styled hair, an expensive leather handbag perched on her arm, and a pair of high-heeled boots that clicked against the pavement. Cassandra's eyes sparkled, but there was a knife-like sharpness in her gaze. "Well, if it isn't Layla." Cassandra's voice dripped with a honeyed poison. "How quaint. Grocery shopping at the local market, are we?" Layla forced a polite smile. "Yes, we come here often. It's more affordable, and the produce is fresher." John stepped forward to say hello, but Cassandra barely acknowledged him. Instead, she raised an eyebrow, giving him a thorough once-over. "And you must be the fabled husband who's always counting pennies," she said with a smirk. "John, was it?" John extended his hand, ignoring the jab. "Yes, pleased to meet you, Cassandra. Layla's mentioned you before." Cassandra tossed her hair and eyed John's coat. "I can see why Layla might be a tad embarrassed to have introduced us sooner. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes." Layla bristled at the insult, but tried to keep her composure. "There's nothing to be embarrassed about. John's a good man." Cassandra's expression hardened. "I'm sure," she said, her tone making it clear that she didn't believe that for a second. "Though I can't imagine what sort of future you might have when he..." She paused, letting her gaze linger on John's worn shoes. Seems to be struggling. Before Layla or John could respond, Cassandra's phone buzzed. She held up a manicured finger to silence them. "Yes, darling," she cooed into her phone. "I'm almost done here." "Yes, Chanel, tomorrow for sure." "Right, love you. Bye." She snapped her phone shut, letting out a delicate sigh. "Ah, my fiancé. We're heading to the Four Seasons Hotel for a fundraiser next week." She paused and smiled, her eyes returning to John. "Maybe one day you two can afford tickets," she added sweetly. "You know, once you've improved your situation." After that remark, Cassandra gave a dismissive wave and strode away, leaving an unsettling hush in her wake. Layla felt a pang of shame and anger, but John simply placed a comforting hand on her shoulder and guided her onward. He didn't utter a single negative word about Cassandra. His mere presence, steady and reassuring, countered Cassandra's malice in a way that words never could. Yet, somewhere in the depth of Layla's heart, a flicker of doubt sprouted. Could she have made a mistake by tying her fate to a man whose fortunes were so modest? With difficulty paying rent, skipping the small luxuries in life, it was hard not to wonder if she had condemned them both to a life of endless struggle. But then she looked at John's gentle smile and recalled that love, genuine love, was priceless. She pressed the thought aside, unaware that the truth about John's background was far more extraordinary than anyone could imagine. Little did Layla know, the wheels of fate had already begun to turn. Destiny was well on its way to disclosing secrets that would leave Cassandra reeling from the blow of her own cruelty. For sometimes, the greatest riches are found beneath the most unassuming surfaces, and the biggest illusions crumble before the simplest truths. The next morning, Layla woke before dawn. She carefully slipped out of the tiny bedroom, trying not to wake John. She took a moment to watch him as he slept, his peaceful expression, his chest rising and falling gently with each breath. She felt a pang of guilt for even entertaining the thought that perhaps she should have chosen a more financially secure partner. Pushing aside the wave of regret, she brewed some coffee, poured a steaming cup, and sat by the rickety kitchen table. They lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. The paint on the walls was chipped, and the flooring showed evidence of wear. Their humble home was nothing like the lavish residences some of Layla's acquaintances boasted about. Cassandra's mocking voice still rang in her ears. "Maybe one day you can afford tickets." The memory made Layla's stomach churn. Slowly, John stirred and joined her in the kitchen. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" he asked, his eyes concerned. Layla opened her mouth to reassure him, but the question lingered in the air, coaxing out the truth. "I'm just a little upset, I guess," she admitted. "I hate that people think so little of us." John nodded, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "I know," he said softly, "but we can't let others define our happiness." He paused, sipping his coffee. "Besides, everything can change in a moment." Though Layla didn't catch the meaning behind John's last phrase, she mustered a small smile. She chalked it up to his typical optimism, a trait that had once attracted her to him so strongly. She didn't realize that John was speaking from experience she was yet to fully grasp. That afternoon, Layla tried distracting herself by searching for a new job. The boutique where she worked part-time had reduced her hours, so she needed supplementary income. She hopped on a local bus and visited the city center, where high rises loomed above well-dressed business people hurrying down polished sidewalks. Her eyes drifted over designer stores, and she couldn't help but think about Cassandra's derisive comments. The city glimmered with potential, but it also gave the impression that many doors stayed closed to people in her situation. While Layla was handing out resumes, she spotted Cassandra unexpectedly. The woman was exiting a luxury car outside an upscale restaurant, waving flamboyantly at someone inside. Layla froze, hoping she wouldn't be noticed. But fate had other plans. Cassandra saw her and started walking toward her with a confident, almost predatory stride. Layla Cassandra greeted, feigning surprise. "Job hunting?" She glanced at the resumes in Layla's hand. How diligent! There was no missing the patronizing emphasis. "Yes," Layla replied curtly, fighting the sting in her pride. "I'm looking for additional work to help with expenses." Cassandra let out a dramatic sigh, as though burdened by a weight only she could perceive. "Oh dear. Well, if you ever need a reference, I might know some people, though they do look for a certain standard." She looked up and down at Layla's simple attire, leaving her insult to hang in the air. Layla's cheeks grew hot. "I appreciate it, but I'll manage," she replied, not wanting to owe Cassandra any favors. Cassandra shrugged. "Suit yourself." Then she flashed a dazzling smile. "You know, my fiancé and I are going to the Four Seasons fundraiser. We might rub elbows with some important figures, CEOs, venture capitalists, owners of major tech companies like Apple, philanthropic big shots. Perhaps I'll mention your name if the opportunity arises." She let out a gentle laugh, "though I'm not sure they'd be interested in a, how should I put it, frugal couple." As Cassandra stepped closer, Layla noticed the glint of expensive jewelry adorning her neck. There was a large diamond pendant that caught the sunlight, and for a moment Layla couldn't help but stare. The gulf between their worlds felt massive. Cassandra's expression softened momentarily, as though she was dealing with a lost child. "Layla, I do have to wonder, why did you settle for John? You're intelligent and lovely. With the right connections, you could have married someone who could give you the life you deserve. Instead, you're scraping by." Layla took a step back, her heart thudding. "I love my husband," she said simply. "That's enough for me." Cassandra rolled her eyes. "Love," she repeated, her tone dripping with disdain, "is fleeting. When you can't pay rent or afford proper health care, let's see how far that love takes you. My fiancé is supportive, wealthy and enthralled by my every move." Layla bit her lip, struggling to maintain her composure. A part of her wanted to lash out, to proclaim that love was worth more than any money. But fear, an unspoken, creeping fear, dampened her resolve. The truth was, financial stress wore on Layla too. She'd seen bills piling up, had felt the anxiety of uncertain tomorrows. Yet, every time she looked at John, a surge of warmth reminded her of the intangible riches they shared. But would that be enough in the long run? "Good luck, dear," Cassandra said, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "I do hope things work out for you two." She paused for dramatic effect, letting her gaze flick over Layla's worn shoes. But reality has a way of teaching harsh lessons. With that, she pivoted and strutted inside the restaurant, leaving Layla standing alone under the harsh afternoon sun. It took her a moment to calm the rush of anger, embarrassment, and a twinge of uncertainty swirling in her chest. Little did she know, the path she'd chosen would lead her somewhere unimaginable, a place where illusions shattered and truths emerged in the most dramatic way possible. One day, the woman who sneered at her would discover that destiny is never as straightforward as it seems, and that a beggar could be the key to unimaginable wealth even if he chose to hide it. Days passed, and life continued its usual rhythm of job applications, chores, and rationed spending. Layla was determined not to let Cassandra's words corrode her love, and John, ever the steady presence, supported her by cooking dinner, tidying their cramped living space, and whispering warm encouragement that kept her spirits afloat. At night, while John slept, Layla's mind wandered to the mortgage payments they couldn't afford, the potential medical bills should either of them fall ill, and the precarious nature of their existence. Yet each time she remembered John's unwavering kindness, how he always put her first, she felt a measure of solace. She had chosen a man whose heart was made of gold, even if his bank account wasn't. Late one evening, while Layla quietly cleaned up after dinner, she caught John hunched over a laptop she'd never seen before. The screen's glow illuminated his face, revealing an intense expression. "What are you working on?" Layla asked, her curiosity piqued. John quickly closed the laptop, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. Just some personal stuff," he said, avoiding her eyes. "Nothing important." Layla nodded slowly, uncertain whether to press him for more information. Something about his demeanor felt off, unlike the open, honest man she knew. However, she decided to trust him. Perhaps he was working on a surprise for her, or maybe he was simply drafting job applications. She let the matter drop, not realizing how pivotal that laptop would be in revealing an enormous secret. The following morning, John left early, leaving a cryptic note on the kitchen table: "Will explain later. Trust me." Layla stared at the note, feeling both worried and intrigued. She had a shift at the boutique, so she couldn't linger, but it tugged at her thoughts the entire day. Why the secrecy? Why now? Meanwhile, Cassandra's life of privilege rolled on unabated. Word of her upcoming fundraiser attendance spread through social circles, and pictures of her lavish outfits and pricey acquisitions popped up on social media. She seemed determined to remind everyone, especially Layla, of the vast gap in their lifestyles. At the boutique, Layla's co-workers chatted animatedly about the fundraiser at the Four Seasons. "I heard tickets cost thousands of dollars per plate," said Mia, a young assistant. "Cassandra's fiancé is loaded," added Tasha, a senior salesperson. "They say he invests heavily in real estate." "She's unstoppable now." Layla listened in silence, her thoughts drifting back to John. While she wasn't typically envious, it was difficult not to feel a pang of longing for a life without constant money worries. She tried to shake it off, reminding herself that outward trappings could be deceptive. A question, though, persisted. Could she find happiness in a life where others viewed her as a fool? That night, after locking up the boutique, Layla walked home under the street lamps that cast an uneven glow across the sidewalk. She braced against a cold breeze, gripping her purse. At least the stars were out, dotting the sky like tiny beacons of hope. Turning a corner, she nearly ran into John, who stood waiting for her just outside their building. "John," she gasped. "You startled me." He smiled sheepishly. "Sorry, I just got home, wanted to wait for you so you wouldn't walk up alone." She appreciated his thoughtfulness. Once they were inside their apartment, Layla raised an eyebrow at him. "So," she began, "what was that note about?" John hesitated, glancing at the laptop bag by the table. "Layla, I'm working on something. A personal project. I can't reveal it all yet." Her brow furrowed. "John, we don't hide things from each other. Whatever it is, you can tell me." The sincerity in her gaze seemed to wrestle with an internal conflict in John's mind. Then he reached for her hand. "Please, just trust me a little longer. I promise I'm not doing anything harmful or illegal. It's just complicated." Despite her unease, Layla nodded, choosing to believe him. "Okay," she said softly, "but I hope I'll understand soon." He gently squeezed her hand. "You will," he promised. "And if all goes well, our situation might be very different." His words hung in the air, stirring a hope within Layla that she tried to quell. She had learned that hope, left unchecked, could grow into disappointment. But John's eyes shone with conviction, and somehow she believed him, at least for now. On the other side of town, Cassandra was at her apartment, its upscale interior design reflecting her lofty tastes. She paced across the marble floors, phone in hand, waiting for her fiancé Dominic to answer. The conversation that followed was short but tense. Dominic was apparently out of the country on a sudden business trip. That was the second time in a month he'd cancelled plans with her at the last minute. Though Cassandra prided herself on her self-confidence, this unexpected shift in Dominic's schedule filled her with unease. "What do you mean you can't make it to the fundraiser?" she demanded, her voice tight. "I've already told everyone we're attending together. They expect us there. This is humiliating." Dominic's placating tone filtered through the speaker. "Cassandra, I promised to make it up to you. Something urgent came up with my investments. I had to fly out to oversee negotiations. My assistant will handle the donation in our name. We'll still get the publicity, but we were supposed to make a grand entrance," she hissed. "I planned everything. My gown, the photo ops, the press coverage. I have to go." Dominic cut in hurriedly. "We'll talk later." The call ended abruptly, leaving Cassandra seething. She gazed at her reflection in an ornate mirror, fury etched on her face. "Fine," she muttered through clenched teeth. "I'll find another way to stand out." Cassandra's cunning mind whirled. The fundraiser was just days away, and she wanted to prove her social superiority and rub it in Layla's face. Even if Dominic couldn't accompany her, she refused to show up alone. She needed someone on her arm, someone to make headlines with her. She scanned her contact list, searching for suitable candidates. As the mistress, she was used to men fawning over her beauty. But tonight, it wasn't about romance. It was about maintaining her social image. When her eyes landed on an older, wealthy executive's name, she tapped a manicured nail against her phone screen, weighing her options. He was known to be generous with gifts, but he was also known to be volatile. She dismissed the thought. Then another name popped up, someone with enough clout to ensure the cameras would flash. A sly smile tugged at her lips as she imagined a triumphant entrance at the Four Seasons. Surely, by that point, Layla's envy would reach a boiling point. Cassandra wanted to see the humiliation in Layla's eyes, to see John in his threadbare coat overshadowed by her wealth. She had no idea how drastically the tables would turn. As she planned and schemed, Cassandra found herself recalling the mocking words she'd hurled at Layla. The memory thrilled her, how she'd watched Layla's face flush with embarrassment. But beneath that thrill, an unspoken sense of foreboding crept in. She dismissed it, convinced that nothing could break her ascendancy. That sense of invincibility would soon prove to be her downfall. Meanwhile, the city's heartbeat pulsed with expectation for the grand event. The fundraiser was rumored to attract philanthropists, business moguls, even minor celebrities. For Cassandra, it was a golden opportunity to showcase her social standing. For Layla and John, it would become the crucible that tested their bond, unveiling truths that were ready to shatter illusions and exact karmic justice. The following day, Layla received a surprise phone call at the boutique. The manager of a new fashion store downtown wanted to schedule an interview for a sales consultant position. The pay was slightly better, and there was potential for advancement. Overjoyed, Layla enthusiastically agreed to meet. That evening, she hurried home to share the good news with John. She found him hunched over his laptop again, but this time, instead of quickly closing it, he looked up at her with a smile. "That's great," he exclaimed when she told him about the potential new job. "I'm so excited," she said, her eyes shining. "I was beginning to lose hope." He took her hands in his expression warm. "You deserve it," he murmured. "This could be a turning point for us." She basked in the positive energy, relieved that John's cryptic behavior hadn't dampened his support for her. Yet she still couldn't help but feel the curious pull toward that laptop. She noticed the brand name on the cover, Lenovo. She couldn't recall seeing John buy it, and it looked expensive, almost new. Where had it come from? Her questions lingered but went unspoken. Over dinner, simple stir-fry and rice, they talked about the future. Layla floated ideas of eventually upgrading their apartment or saving up for a short vacation. John listened intently, occasionally nodding with an enigmatic glint in his eyes. "Someday soon we'll have more options," he reassured her. "I'm certain of it." Layla quirked an eyebrow. You've been saying that a lot recently, John. Do you know something I don't? He paused, then simply said, Just trust me. The next morning dawned crisp, the sun's rays illuminating a sky free of clouds. Layla set off for her interview, nerves tingling. She felt underdressed in her well-kept but modest outfit, especially when she walked past people in tailored suits heading into sleek buildings. Reminding herself to remain confident, she stepped into the new store. The interview went well. The manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Diane, seemed impressed with Layla's retail experience and her calm demeanor. At the end of their meeting, Diane nodded appreciatively. "We'll let you know by tomorrow," she said. "We're looking for someone who can handle high-end clientele, and you appear capable." Layla left with her heart soaring, the prospect of a job that would alleviate some financial burden. She imagined telling John, maybe even celebrating with a rare dinner out if she got the position. But as she turned onto the busy sidewalk, she nearly collided with a group of people passing by. Among them was Cassandra, flanked by two friends wearing equally flashy ensembles. "Layla?" Cassandra's feigned surprise rang hollow. "Fancy seeing you here in the upscale district. Shopping? Or still job hunting?" Layla forced a tight smile. "Interview, actually." Cassandra exchanged glances with her friends. "How ambitious," she said with a soft laugh. "Though I can't imagine the sort of place that would hire." She trailed off, letting the implied insult resonate. "Excuse me," Layla said, her patience wearing thin. "I have somewhere to be." She started to walk away when Cassandra stopped her. "Before you go," Cassandra began, "the Four Seasons fundraiser is tomorrow evening. My new companion will be the talk of the night. Do you think you and John can scrape together the funds for a ticket?" She let out an airy laugh. "I hear they're accepting last-minute attendees, but it'll probably cost you more than a month's rent." Layla's nostrils flared. She despised how Cassandra wielded wealth as a weapon. Without dignifying Cassandra's mockery with an answer, she turned on her heel and disappeared into the crowded sidewalk. Cassandra watched her go with an air of triumph. "I suppose that's a no," she mused aloud, nudging her friends. Poor Layla, what a shame. Little did Cassandra know, tomorrow night would not play out as she imagined. Sometimes the best surprises come when the world believes it has you figured out. Soon enough, Cassandra's arrogance and Layla's unwavering faith in her husband would collide in a way neither woman could have foreseen. By late afternoon, Layla was back home, recounting her interview to John, who listened attentively. She was about to start dinner when someone knocked on the door. They rarely received visitors, so Layla glanced at John apprehensively before opening it. Standing in the hallway was an impeccably dressed man in his early 30s. His tailored suit and polished shoes gave the impression of a personal assistant or a corporate representative. He smiled politely. "Good evening. Is Mr. John—" He checked a piece of paper. "Mr. John Carter here?" Layla's brow furrowed. Yes. May I ask who's inquiring?" The man extended a business card. "My name is Martin. The first represent the Four Seasons Philanthropic Department. We've been trying to get in touch with Mr. Carter regarding tomorrow's fundraiser. It's in support of a children's hospital. We heard from a reputable source that he might be interested in attending as a guest of honor." Layla's eyes widened, and she turned to John, who stood behind her with an unreadable expression. "John, what is this about?" John cleared his throat, stepping forward. "Thank you for coming, Martin. I appreciate the personal visit, but I prefer to maintain privacy in these matters." The man, Martin, nodded respectfully. "Of course, Mr. Carter, but I'm under instructions from the event organizers to deliver your invitations personally. They'd be honored by your presence." He handed John an envelope sealed with elegant gold lettering. Layla spotted the Four Seasons Hotel logo, a hallmark of opulence. She stood speechless, uncertain how to react. This was the same event Cassandra wouldn't stop bragging about, the same fundraiser that cost a small fortune per seat. Why on earth would they want John there? John accepted the envelope calmly, thanked Martin, and closed the door. Layla stared at him, her mind a whirl of questions. Finally, she managed to ask, "What just happened?" John opened the envelope, revealing 2 gilded tickets and a note inviting them both as VIP guests. His voice was quiet. "I've been working on something," he admitted, glancing at the laptop bag. "Part of that involves connections I made a while back. Apparently, they decided to send us an invitation." Layla struggled to process. "But how did you get these connections?" She paused, pressing her fingers to her temple. "John, this is the Four Seasons. SIP tickets cost a fortune. Cassandra's fiancé is the one with money, not us." "How?" He guided her gently to the couch. "Layla, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice slightly trembling with tension. "But please understand, I was never trying to deceive you. I just never wanted to be valued for my wealth." Layla felt her heart hammering in her chest. "Your wealth? John, you've always told me you came from a humble background." John looked down, his expression conflicted. "I did, in a sense. I was raised modestly, not wanting to flaunt anything. My mother taught me humility, even though our family business was successful. But after she passed away, I inherited a significant portion of our family's holdings. One, I have enough money to live comfortably many times over." Layla's mind reeled. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," John continued, "that the laptop I've been using is for my family's accounts and philanthropic initiatives. The reason I've been secretive is because, well, I wanted a partner who loved me for me, not for my bank account." "You've proven that 1,000 times over, Layla." Tears pricked Layla's eyes. "So, this entire time you let us struggle," she couldn't deny feeling a jolt of anger. "We've been scrimping on groceries, worried about rent, and you could have helped us." John's face fell, guilt evident. "I never wanted you to endure stress, but I also didn't want to sabotage the sincerity of our relationship. I needed to see if you truly believed in me when I was just a regular guy, and you did. You never once made me feel inadequate, until Cassandra started planting seeds of doubt." Layla fought back tears of frustration, relief, and betrayal, all tangled up. "Why didn't you at least tell me once we were married?" John exhaled, his shoulders slumping in regret. "Because once we tied the knot, I worried it would feel like I tricked you. The longer I waited, the harder it became. But tomorrow, I can finally show you. I was planning to tell you everything after finalizing a big project under my philanthropic branch. And the fundraiser tomorrow, well, it's partly sponsored by that branch." Layla buried her face in her hands, mind swirling. She thought of all the nights they'd gone without certain comforts, all the times she'd felt humiliated by Cassandra's taunts. And all the while, John had had the means to protect them. But beneath her anger, a tender realization surfaced. John's test, while painful, proved that he sought genuine love, not a superficial relationship based on money. In a world where wealth could often attract gold diggers, he'd wanted the real thing. John gently reached for her hand. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "If you hate me now, I understand. But please, let me make it up to you. I want to share everything I have with you." Layla studied his face, seeing the honest remorse in his eyes. Despite her emotions being a storm of contradictions, she also recognized the depth of his love. No matter how furious or bewildered she felt, she couldn't deny that John was a good man. She thought about the times he'd gone out of his way to help others, even with their limited budget, and realized that his heart had always been genuine. "I don't hate you," she said softly, voice trembling. "I'm just overwhelmed." He wrapped his arms around her. "Take all the time you need to process. But one thing is certain, I love you. And tomorrow, if you're willing, I want the world to see who you are, my wife, who chose me when I was nobody in her eyes." Layla returned his embrace, letting herself cry silently against his chest. Uncertainty still crowded her thoughts, but one thing shone clearly: John had never intended to harm her. In fact, he'd been trying to protect something priceless: their authentic bond. Outside, the city night was illuminated by neon lights and distant skyscrapers. Within that humble apartment, however, a whole new world of possibilities had burst open. The man Cassandra deemed a beggar was, in fact, a millionaire, possibly more. And soon, at the very fundraiser she boasted about, Cassandra would be forced to confront a truth that could topple her arrogant facade. Because karma, once set into motion, does not rest until every pretense is laid bare. The day of the fundraiser arrived like a gathering storm. Layla woke early, her emotions still raw from John's revelation. He had spent the night on the living room couch, wanting to give her space after dropping such a life-altering truth in her lap. Upon waking, Layla found John sipping coffee quietly, an apprehensive but hopeful look on his face. "Morning," he greeted softly. "I'll support whatever you decide. If you don't want to go to the fundraiser, I'll respect that." Layla's heart skipped. Part of her wanted to hide from the world and sort out her jumbled feelings. Another part remembered Cassandra's cruelty, her relentless mockery, and the twisted satisfaction she took in belittling them. Layla wanted to walk into that fundraiser, not out of vengeful spite, but to assert her dignity. She also realized that, for better or worse, she loved John. He'd made a mistake by hiding his wealth, yes, but his reasons were rooted in wanting authentic love. "I'm going," Layla stated quietly, with a resolute edge in her voice. John's shoulders relaxed, relief washing over him. "Then we'll do it together." The next few hours were a whirlwind. John offered to buy her an extravagant outfit, but Layla refused. Instead, she opted for a modest dress. She already owned a simple black gown that flattered her figure without screaming opulence. John, for the first time since Layla had known him, slipped into a tailored suit. She gasped when she saw him wearing it. He looked like a different person. The transformation was profound. Gone was the so-called beggar in shabby clothes, replaced by a refined, confident man who seemed born to command the attention of a room. Before they left, John made a discreet phone call, instructing someone to have a car sent to their address. Layla's stomach fluttered when she saw a sleek black sedan pull up to the curb, driven by a polite chauffeur who opened the door for them. She felt a sense of unreality, as though they'd stepped into a parallel universe. As they settled in the luxurious leather seats, John glanced at her anxiously. "You okay?" Layla forced a small smile, fiddling with the hem of her dress. "I feel like I'm in someone else's life." He gently took her hand. "It's still us, just a different facet of our reality." She nodded, heart pounding. Thoughts swirled. How would Cassandra react? What would happen when they stepped into the spotlight? Part of her dreaded the confrontation, another part braced for a sense of vindication. After so many humiliations, the idea of proving Cassandra wrong was admittedly satisfying. Upon reaching the Four Seasons Hotel, Layla's eyes widened. The building sparkled under evening lights, its grand entrance lined with an impressive red carpet. Attendees, dressed to the nines, glided through the doors like a parade of prosperity. Luxury cars, black limousines, and even a Rolls-Royce or two graced the curb as uniformed valet attendants ushered each one forward. The hotel's lobby was equally breathtaking: marble floors, towering floral arrangements, and crystal chandeliers reflecting soft golden light. Already, Layla felt a swirl of self-consciousness. She'd never been in a venue so lavish. John guided her gently, his hand resting protectively on her lower back. A staff member greeted them, scanning their invitations. Upon seeing John's name, the person's demeanor changed from polite to reverential. "Mr. Carter," he said, voice slightly hushed, "we're honored you could attend. Please, this way." We have a special suite reserved for VIPs. Layla glanced at John, who gave her an encouraging nod. They followed the staff member through the grand hall and into a plush reception area where waiters offered champagne. The hum of idle conversation floated in the air, punctuated by bursts of laughter. Everywhere Layla turned, she saw designer gowns, custom suits, and glimmering jewelry. And there, near the center, stood Cassandra. Her hair was styled in an elaborate updo, her gown something shimmering and obviously expensive. Next to her was a middle-aged man Layla didn't recognize, presumably the stand-in date. Cassandra had wrangled since Dominic was absent. Cassandra spoke animatedly to him, but her gaze roamed the room like a predator. It wasn't long before she spotted Layla and John. Instantly, Cassandra's expression flickered through a range of emotions: disbelief, confusion, and simmering annoyance. She excused herself from her companion and glided over, eyes narrowed. "Layla," she greeted, her tone guarded. "I never expected to see you here." "How? Surprising." Layla's heart hammered, but she forced a polite smile. "We received an invitation." Before Cassandra could retort, her eyes fell on John. She did a double take, stunned by his tailored suit and confident poise. The John she knew was always wearing threadbare clothes, looking decidedly humble. But now he looked nothing of the sort. She let out a perplexed laugh. "John, you look so different. Did you borrow that suit?" John's smile was cordial. "Not exactly," he said evenly. "Thought I'd dress for the occasion." Cassandra blinked, struggling to reconcile the image of the man in front of her with the beggar she'd derided. She cleared her throat, leaning in as though to share a conspiratorial secret. "Layla, dear," she said, eyes flicking between them, "you must be careful. This event is for serious donors. They might not take kindly to gate crashers." Layla felt a surge of indignation. "We're here by invitation," she said through clenched teeth, fighting to keep her voice even. But Cassandra wasn't done. She turned to John, voice dripping with condescension. "John, it's sweet of you to play dress-up for Layla's sake, but this crowd can see through a facade. My fiancé, Dominic, planned to be here, but he was unexpectedly called away." She paused, as if to emphasize that her absent companion was still miles above them in stature. "Anyway, if you two need a place to sit, perhaps we can find you something near the back." A soft chime echoed through the reception hall. The hotel's event coordinator, a poised woman in a sleek black dress, stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin shortly. SIP guests, please follow me to the main ballroom." Cassandra's date hurried over to escort her. As Cassandra turned, Layla noticed the faint lines of irritation around her eyes. She was used to dominating every room, but Layla and John's presence had shifted the dynamic. The game had changed, though Cassandra didn't yet realize how drastically. John leaned toward Layla, his voice low. "We should head in." They followed the coordinator into the ballroom, a breathtaking space with crystal chandeliers, elegantly decorated tables, and a broad stage at the front. A hush fell over the crowd as they took their seats. Layla's heart pounded at the idea of mingling with some of the city's most prominent figures, CEOs, philanthropists, celebrities, and more. To her astonishment, John guided her toward a table near the front. When they arrived, an understated nameplate read, "Mr. and Mrs. John Carter." A wave of whispers rippled through the surrounding crowd. Layla caught snippets of conversation. "That's him? I heard he financed half the pediatric wing. But he never goes public." Realization slammed into Layla, but she managed to keep her composure. Cassandra, however, was only a few tables away, her expression morphing from triumph to confusion and creeping dread. She frowned, leaning over to whisper something in her companion's ear, but her eyes never left John. The lights dimmed slightly as a well-known local celebrity took the stage, microphone in hand. The crowd quieted down, turning its attention to the podium. "Good evening, everyone," the host began. "Welcome to our annual Children's Hospital fundraiser. Tonight's event aims to raise money for specialized equipment, improved patient care, and research initiatives. We're especially grateful to have some of our most valued supporters here." Layla's gaze flicked to John, who seemed uncharacteristically serious, as though shouldering great responsibility. That's when it hit her. He wasn't just another attendee, he was one of the main sponsors. She felt a rush of pride, disbelief, and lingering annoyance over his secrecy. A short video commenced on the large screen, showcasing the hospital's success stories, children smiling, parents expressing gratitude. Layla found herself moved to tears, reminded that beneath all the glitz, this was about helping people in need. John gently wrapped an arm around her, whispering, "This is what matters." When the video ended, the host took the mic again. "As many of you know, our fundraiser tonight wouldn't be possible without the generous patronage of philanthropic individuals who believe in our cause. One such patron, typically very private, has graciously agreed to appear this evening to support our cause openly. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. John Carter." The ballroom erupted in applause as John stood. Layla's breath hitched. She wasn't prepared for the sudden spotlight. Cameras flashed, focusing on John as he strode to the podium. Even Cassandra, at her table, wore an expression that was equal parts shock and disbelief. John gripped the microphone, clearing his throat. "Thank you for the warm welcome," he began. "I've always believed that true wealth isn't measured by what we keep, but by how we help improve the lives of others. This hospital holds a special place in my heart. Not many people know this, but as a child, I spent weeks in a hospital with a serious illness. I survived thanks to compassionate doctors and the generosity of donors." Layla felt tears threaten again. She'd never heard this part of his story, so many missing pieces that explained why John's philanthropic ventures mattered so deeply to him. John continued, "Tonight, I'm pledging additional funds to help expand the pediatric wing and provide free treatments for children from underprivileged families. I sincerely hope that each of you will consider how much even a small donation can make a difference, because every child deserves a chance." A thunderous standing ovation followed. From her seat, Layla saw the adoration and respect pouring toward John. Nearby, Cassandra's face went pale, her mouth slightly open in astonishment. The man she'd mocked as a beggar was actually one of the night's star benefactors. Returning from the podium, John took his seat beside Layla. The vibrations of applause still filled the room, and she didn't hesitate to embrace him, whispering in his ear, "I'm proud of you." His eyes misted. "Thank you," he whispered back, voice hoarse, "for loving me even when you thought I had nothing." Once the applause died down, the event flowed into a dinner service. The clinking of silverware and murmurs of conversation filled the ballroom. As Layla picked at her plate, she felt eyes upon her. Sure enough, Cassandra was making her way over, her companion left behind. "John," Cassandra began, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I didn't realize you were so involved in these types of events." Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her nerves. John remained cordial. "I believe in the cause." A flash of confusion crossed Cassandra's face. "So, you've been wealthy this entire time?" She was trying to hide her astonishment, but it came out in stilted words. "And you let us all think you were poor?" John's gaze slid to Layla for a moment before returning to Cassandra. "My private affairs are just that private. I never felt the need to broadcast my financial status." Cassandra's laugh sounded hollow. "Right, of course, but you must understand how it looks, someone of your standing pretending to be impoverished. Some people might think..." She halted, clearly trying to salvage the situation. "I mean, surely if Layla had known, she would have..." Layla bristled at the insinuation. Would have what, Cassandra? Cassandra's eyes darted, searching for an angle. Well, dear, you went around complaining about finances. It was all quite dramatic. If John has this much money, why live in such a tiny apartment and shop at discount markets? It doesn't make sense. John's expression darkened slightly. It's a personal choice to live humbly. Not everyone cares to flaunt their wealth. Clearly, Cassandra said, failing to disguise her bitterness. She turned her piercing gaze on Layla. So, you knew about this all along? Or did he keep you in the dark? The question was laced with malice. Layla straightened her posture, meeting Cassandra's gaze head-on. I only found out recently, but that's between me and my husband. Cassandra's frustration mounted visibly. Her plan for the evening had been to showcase her own status. Now she was overshadowed by the very couple she'd ridiculed. Her cheeks colored and her composure frayed. You both must think you're so clever, she snapped. Showing up here like you belong. But trust me, it takes more than money to navigate these circles. John's jaw tightened. It takes integrity too, Cassandra. She narrowed her eyes, a flush creeping over her face. Before she could fire back, a group of high-profile attendees approached John to congratulate him and discuss charity initiatives. Forced to step aside, Cassandra found herself ignored, overshadowed as donors and journalists fawned over John and expressed admiration for Layla. She retreated to her table, where her companion greeted her with a sympathetic shrug. The fundraiser progressed into a night of uplifting speeches, heartfelt stories from hospital staff and patients, and an auction of donated luxury items. John made a significant bid on a painting, further sealing his reputation as a generous patron. Meanwhile, Cassandra sulked at her table, her attempts to network overshadowed by John's philanthropic aura. No matter how hard she tried to regain attention, the focus remained firmly on the man she had once labeled a beggar. When the applause settled, guests mingled over dinner. Cassandra, visibly rattled, made her way to Layla and John, struggling to mask her disbelief. "You've been wealthy all along?" she asked John, forcing a stiff smile. "Why pretend to be poor?" John stayed calm. "My finances are my private business. I never saw a need to flaunt them." Cassandra's tension flared. "So you both find it amusing to show up now as VIPs? It takes more than money to thrive in these circles. It also takes integrity," John replied firmly. Momentarily at a loss, Cassandra tried firing pointed questions at Layla, implying she must have known about the money. Layla set her straight. "This is between my husband and me." Before Cassandra could argue, a rush of philanthropists and journalists surrounded John, praising his generosity. Ignored and outshone, Cassandra retreated in frustration. Despite her attempts to reclaim attention, the focus remained on John's heartfelt donation and the genuine love that bound him to Layla. The fundraiser concluded on a high note, with more donations than expected. Journalists snapped pictures of John shaking hands with hospital representatives. Layla stayed at his side, graciously acknowledging the well-wishers. Cassandra, overshadowed, lingered on the periphery, face taut with forced smiles. When Layla and John finally left, stepping outside into the cool night air, they found the chauffeur waiting. This time, Layla settled into the seat without argument. She realized the superficial element of it all could be balanced by generosity and humility, exactly what John demonstrated. As the car drove away, Layla rested her head on John's shoulder. Neither spoke, but the warmth between them was palpable, a silent renewal of vows. At home, Layla kicked off her heels and sank onto the couch. John loosened his tie and joined her, removing his suit jacket with relief. In that moment, their humble apartment felt more like home than any five-star hotel suite could. "You were amazing," Layla told him, still reeling from all that had happened. "Everyone respects you." John exhaled, leaning his head back. "Feels strange, doesn't it? Going from anonymity to center stage." She nodded, a little. but it's good that the hospital benefited. John studied her face, searching her eyes. Are you okay with this new reality? With me? Layla managed a wry smile. It's a lot to take in. I'm still upset you hid this for so long, but I understand why. I won't pretend it didn't hurt, though. He reached for her hand. Let me make it up to you, he said earnestly. I'll be transparent from now on. No more secrets. Layla squeezed his hand gently. Deal. News of John's hidden fortune spread quickly, turning him into a local hero for his philanthropic work. Magazines praised his generosity, and social circles buzzed with curiosity about how Layla, once thought to be married to a beggar, had secured such a humble yet wealthy spouse. Layla tried to keep her head down, focusing on her new job rather than the sudden notoriety. Cassandra, meanwhile, fell from grace. Rumors swirled that Dominic's businesses were collapsing, their engagement on the rocks. Unable to flaunt her supposed fairy tale any longer, she was shunned by acquaintances who realized she'd been mocking John while craving his status. One late afternoon, Layla ran into Cassandra by chance. Cassandra looked pale and distressed, finally admitting Dominic had ended things, leaving her with nothing. Though remembering every insult Cassandra had thrown, Layla felt a pang of sympathy. She offered genuine condolences instead of scorn. Humbled and remorseful, Cassandra apologized, acknowledging she'd mistaken money for true happiness. Layla simply nodded, wishing her well. As Cassandra walked away, Layla saw firsthand how quickly arrogance can crumble and how powerful it is to choose compassion over vengeance. Weeks turned into months. Layla adjusted to her new position at the fashion store, finding satisfaction in helping clients pick out outfits that enhanced their confidence. She maintained her independence, even though John insisted he could support her financially without her ever needing to work. They moved out of the tiny apartment, but not into a sprawling mansion as some might expect. Instead, they chose a comfortable home in a friendly neighborhood, a place roomy enough for future children, should they decide to grow their family, but still modest compared to what John could have afforded. Though John continued to be recognized for his philanthropy, he remained discreet, dedicating much of his time to overseeing donations and visiting hospitals. Layla accompanied him sometimes, helping with fundraising events. Despite having the means to travel anywhere they wanted, they found joy in simple weekend getaways, local parks, and quiet dinners at home. Cassandra's story faded from rumor circles. Layla only heard fragments, that she'd started working in a real estate office, trying to rebuild her finances. She no longer flaunted expensive brands on social media. Some said she'd developed a newfound humility. Others said she was merely biding her time. Regardless, Layla harbored no ill will, content to let the past rest. One evening, John surprised Layla with a candlelit dinner in their new backyard, fairy lights twinkling in the darkness. They chatted about the day, the charity expansions, and the possibility of traveling to see John's extended family. As the meal ended, John reached across the table, taking Layla's hand. "I want you to know," he began, "there isn't a day I regret marrying you. You proved to me that love could be genuine, free from the shadows of greed." Layla met his gaze. "I'm glad we found each other," she said softly. "Even when I thought you were a poor man, you gave me the richness of your heart." He smiled, eyes shining in the gentle glow of the string lights. "I kept so many secrets from you, yet you still forgave me. I don't deserve you." "Don't say that," Layla murmured, scooting her chair closer. "You've made up for it by showing me every day how much you love me and how much you care for others." They sat in a tranquil hush, hands entwined. A sense of peace enveloped them, a promise that no matter what storms life brought, they would weather them together. The beggar and the wife who married him for love, had emerged stronger than ever, a testament that true wealth is the union of respect, kindness, and devotion. And so, what started as a cruel joke turned into a testament that life has a unique way of revealing the truth. John, once mocked as a beggar, became the shining example of how real wealth isn't just about currency, but about generosity and integrity. Layla, who loved him wholeheartedly without knowledge of his fortune, proved that loyalty is worth more than status or luxury. Cassandra, whose laughter once echoed with contempt, found herself humbled by harsh reality, learning that empty pride can crumble faster than any financial empire. This story reminds us that appearances can be deceiving and that genuine love outlasts any amount of money. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster of twists, tears, and triumphs. If you were moved by this story, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing you tales that touch the heart and stir the soul. Wealthy millionaire husband caught with mistress, at the clinic pregnant wife forced to face the truth. When fate thrusts the unthinkable into the light, even the strongest hearts can crumble. Meet Grace, a devoted wife whose quiet joy in carrying her first child is shattered by one casual glance at a clinic doorway. She doesn't just see her husband, Daniel, an influential entrepreneur worth millions. She finds him holding another woman's hand, a woman clearly pregnant. In an instant, Grace's world blurs into heartbreak and betrayal, twisting her hopes for a perfect family into a nightmare. This story unveils one woman's fight for truth, dignity, and redemption as she battles secrets, confronts bitter enemies, and learns that sometimes karma strikes harder than anyone can imagine. Grace Bennett had always been the kind of person who put others' happiness before her own. Raised in a modest suburb of Denver, Colorado, she learned early on that life is anything but predictable. Her father, a firefighter, and her mother, a school teacher, instilled a sense of resilience in her. With scholarships and part-time jobs, Grace managed to graduate from the University of Colorado with honors in marketing. She dreamed of building a life filled with purpose, possibly even a small business of her own one day. It was during a charity gala in downtown Denver that she first met Daniel Bennett, a captivating businessman with a penchant for risk-taking and grand gestures. Daniel's father was an established real estate magnate, yet Daniel had carved his own niche by founding Bennett Innovations, a tech company specializing in healthcare software. He boasted significant contracts with established clinics like the Mayo Clinic and local Denver hospitals. At 27, his fortune was already soaring into the millions. To Grace, Daniel was more than his money. She was mesmerized by his quick wit, confident demeanor, and the kindness he showed to those around him. In a setting filled with stiff socialites, Daniel had leaned in close to Grace, asking genuine questions about her life. Unlike many wealthy men, he seemed sincere. Within weeks, they were dating. Within a year, they were engaged. Both families approved. Grace's parents saw Daniel as a responsible, devoted partner, while Daniel's father and mother adored Grace's warmth and intelligence. Life after marriage felt like a dream. Grace moved into Daniel's sprawling penthouse overlooking Denver's skyline. Every morning she woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, a cup of gourmet coffee prepared by the household staff, and her husband's gentle kiss on her cheek. The couple donated to charities, hosted classy parties, and traveled abroad. Though money never seduced Grace, she appreciated the security it provided. No more scraping by on scholarships or juggling menial jobs. When Grace found out she was pregnant, she nearly toppled over with happiness. Daniel reacted with genuine excitement, lifting her into his arms and spinning her around the living room. He immediately hired a top interior designer to create a nursery fit for royalty. Pastel walls, plush carpets, a handcrafted crib, everything seemed tailored for their baby's comfort and safety. Friends, families, and social media followers lauded them as the perfect couple, successful and philanthropic, awaiting the arrival of a blessed child. Yet as her pregnancy progressed, Grace noticed subtle changes in Daniel's routine. Late-night work calls became more frequent. Business trips that once lasted a day turned into weekend excursions. Still, she trusted him. Why wouldn't she? Daniel had always been transparent about wanting to expand his business. She chalked up his absences to ambitious goals, just as they had always shared, building a thriving empire that would benefit them and their future child. Little did Grace know, her trust was about to be shattered. By the time Grace was 6 months pregnant, the cracks in her fairy tale life became too big to ignore. Something about Daniel's phone habits had changed. He would angle the screen away from her during calls or excuse himself to the hallway before answering texts. He used to regale her with stories about board meetings and pitch sessions, but recently his conversations about work had grown vague and short. Despite her growing discomfort, Grace pushed her concerns aside. She told herself that pregnant women are prone to heightened emotions. She watched YouTube videos on managing pregnancy anxiety, convinced that her hormones might be fueling irrational suspicions. Some nights, she reminded herself that Daniel had never shown any sign of disloyalty before, so why would he start now? Yet, there were strange coincidences she couldn't ignore. Once, she found a receipt from a high-end spa tucked into Daniel's jacket pocket. When she teased him about getting a massage, he shrugged it off, claiming it was for a business client. Another time, a faint scent of unfamiliar perfume lingered in his car floral, decidedly feminine, not at all like Grace's subtle vanilla fragrance. He laughed it off, saying it must have been from a co-worker he'd given a ride to a corporate event. Her best friend, Allison, a legal secretary with a fierce protective streak, raised eyebrows at these stories. "Grace, you're not paranoid," Allison insisted. "It's not normal for a married man to change his habits this drastically. Just keep your eyes open." Still, Grace tried to see the best in Daniel. He was providing so well for her and their unborn child. She couldn't imagine him hurting them. Then came the cancelled prenatal appointments. Daniel had been so eager to attend every ultrasound at first, but as the baby grew and the appointments increased, he missed them with alarming frequency. Sometimes it was a crucial investor meeting. Other times he was out of town meeting prospective clients. Grace made excuses for him. Her mother, who was staying with them temporarily, became quietly concerned. During dinner one night, her mother murmured, "It's not like Daniel to skip out on responsibilities. Maybe he's dealing with something he can't talk about yet." Grace nodded, trying to comfort herself with that possibility. But a whisper of fear lodged itself in her heart. Late at night, she would cradle her belly, whispering to the baby that everything would be okay. She couldn't fathom that the pillar of stability in her life, her once-in-a-lifetime love, might be hiding something deeper and darker than a work secret. Grace's next prenatal checkup was scheduled at an exclusive women's clinic in downtown Denver, known for its privacy and state-of-the-art facilities, one that had partnered with Daniel's software company. Normally, she would have arranged the visit with Daniel, but his assistant had sent a message that he was swamped with last-minute investor conferences. Although disappointed, Grace put on a brave face, deciding to go alone. On a crisp Wednesday morning, she eased herself into the clinic's waiting area, dwarfed by plush chairs and glossy magazines. A mural on the wall depicted serene mountains, an attempt to calm expectant mothers. Grace was reading through some pamphlets on neonatal nutrition when she heard a familiar voice, deep, assured, and carrying that certain timber she recognized in her sleep. Her heart jumped. She stood up, following the sound of Daniel's voice through a half-open corridor leading toward private consultation rooms. At first, she tried to rationalize. Maybe there was a surprise. Maybe Daniel had rearranged his schedule to attend. But then her footsteps stalled. Another voice echoed alongside his feminine, flirtatious, with a lilt of laughter that made Grace's blood run cold. She edged closer, her pregnant belly making stealth nearly impossible. Through the sliver of open door, she saw Daniel, dressed in his tailored suit, leaning toward a striking woman with chestnut hair. He was holding her hand. The woman had a small baby bump. Grace froze, her breath catching in her throat. She placed a hand protectively over her own bump, trying to make sense of the scene. The woman was looking at Daniel with a mixture of adoration and expectancy. Daniel murmured something about how everything would be fine, that he'd take care of her and the baby. Before Grace's eyes, he gently brushed a strand of hair from the woman's face, a move so tender it rattled Grace to her core. Stunned, she felt her pulse thunder in her ears. All the red flags she'd ignored, all the doubts she'd suppressed, coalesced into a single horrifying truth. Her husband was here, at the same clinic, comforting another pregnant woman. She felt dizzy, a wave of nausea nearly overwhelming her. Her stomach churned, not just from pregnancy, but from the raw, emotional shock. Summoning every fragment of courage, Grace pushed the door open. The two in the room whirled around to face her, terror flickering across Daniel's features as if he'd seen a ghost. The woman's eyes flicked between Grace's pregnant belly and Daniel's guilt-ridden expression. "Grace!" Daniel choked out, taking a step forward, but Grace recoiled. She glared at him, voice trembling. What on earth is going on here? The other woman turned pale, stumbling backward slightly. She looked more shocked than defiant. Daniel raised both hands in a gesture meant to soothe, but there was no placating the fury and heartbreak in Grace's eyes. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out," Daniel managed, his words hollow. Grace could hardly breathe. A nurse passing by paused, alarmed by the palpable tension. Without waiting for answers, Grace bolted out of the clinic, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her mind spun with 1,000 scenarios. Was this a fling? A long-term affair? The echo of the woman's laughter and the sight of that baby bump hammered home the ultimate betrayal. Her husband, her knight in shining armor, had shattered the life they'd built together in a single moment. She had come here to care for her unborn child, only to discover her husband had fathered another. Grace barely remembered how she got home that day. The drive was a haze of tears, anger, and trembling hands. Her mother, upon seeing Grace's stricken face, rushed forward in concern. But Grace said nothing, walking straight to her bedroom, locking the door and collapsing on the bed. Hours passed, with Grace sobbing quietly, clutching her belly. She felt an overwhelming sense of guilt. Was the intense stress hurting her child? Between ragged breaths, she promised herself she would stay strong for the baby. But how could she remain strong when the foundation of her marriage had just been obliterated? It was evening when she heard Daniel's footsteps. He knocked softly on the door, calling her name. She refused to answer. She heard him plead, his words muffled, but the sincerity in his voice seemed real. Yet in that moment, she wanted nothing to do with him. The sense of betrayal ran too deep. Eventually, her mother knocked gently. "Grace," she said, voice strained, "Daniel wants to explain. We can go to a hotel if you'd prefer, but he's saying he wants to talk this out." Summoning the remnants of her composure, Grace unlocked the door. Her mother stepped in, and Grace whispered, "I'll talk to him, but only if you stay. I don't feel safe alone with him right now." Though not physically afraid, Grace feared the emotional manipulation Daniel might attempt. She knew how charming he could be, how persuasive. She needed an anchor, someone who could see through any half-truths. Her mother nodded, silently agreeing to protect her daughter's fragile heart. They met Daniel in the living room. He stood by the fireplace, the flames casting shadows on his drawn face. He looked tired and haunted. For a moment, Grace almost pitied him, but then the memory of him holding another woman's hand returned. She steeled herself. Daniel exhaled, raking a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry," he began, voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. It happened before I even realized how serious we'd become." She was an old acquaintance. We reconnected at a conference in Los Angeles. I was lonely, stressed. Grace's eyes flashed. "Don't you dare say you were lonely. You had me, your wife, and I was carrying your child," she spat, tears threatening to spill anew. He lowered his head. "I'm not making excuses. I messed up, and I tried to end things. But by the time I did, she told me she was pregnant. I've been seeing her to sort out how to handle this situation. Grace repeated, voice dripping with bitterness. "That's your child, Daniel," he nodded miserably. "Yes, it's my child. I told her I'd provide for them. I wasn't sure how to tell you. Every time I tried, I panicked, terrified of losing you and our life together." Grace shook with rage. She felt her mother's hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "You've already lost me, Daniel," she whispered, voice brittle. "What were you expecting would happen if you never told me until the child was born? Did you think you could hide them forever?" He sighed deeply, tears forming. "Grace, I love you. I love our baby. Don't say you love me." Grace cut him off, voice trembling. "Not when you betrayed me, in the cruelest way. I'm carrying your child, and you're fathering another." Silence blanketed the room, broken only by the crackling fire. Her mother's eyes brimmed with sadness as she witnessed her daughter's heartbreak. Unable to bear the emotional onslaught, Grace fled to the bedroom once more. She locked the door behind her, blocking out Daniel's pleas. She was done for the night, consumed by a private, unimaginable despair that hollowed her from the inside. In the days that followed, Grace operated on autopilot. She attended her prenatal checkups alone, no longer texting Daniel with updates about the baby's progress. Their communication was limited to cold, terse exchanges about household matters. The warmth that once enveloped their home had evaporated, leaving only tension and resentment. Daniel spent most nights on the couch, aware that Grace wouldn't so much as let him step foot in the bedroom. Allison, ever the lioness' best friend, urged Grace to see a divorce lawyer immediately. "You have to protect yourself," Allison declared one afternoon, brandishing a stack of documents. "He's got money, property, and connections. If you let him get the upper hand, you could end up in a messy, legal battle, especially if another child is involved." Grace, though still in a state of shock, recognized the logic. Part of her wanted to cling to hope that Daniel would wake up, realize the enormity of his betrayal, and somehow salvage what they had. But the more pragmatic side told her that a line had been crossed. Even if they tried to rebuild, the trust might never return. She arranged a meeting with a discreet family law attorney, recommended by Allison's colleagues. Sitting in a sleek downtown office, Grace felt surreal discussing potential division of assets and custody arrangements. She'd spent countless hours imagining this baby's future in a loving two-parent home. Now, she faced the possibility that she'd be a single mother, grappling with heartbreak and the complexities of co-parenting with a man she no longer trusted. While waiting for the attorney to finalize some paperwork, Grace stared blankly at the Denver skyline. Her hand drifted to her belly. A gentle flutter reminded her of the little life inside. That tiny movement ignited a spark of resolve. Her child was innocent. No matter the chaos swirling outside, she had to remain a pillar of strength and stability for her baby. Back at the penthouse, Daniel's mood oscillated between remorseful and evasive. He begged Grace to let him explain more, to attend couples therapy, to show he wanted to be part of her and the baby's life. Yet every time Grace looked at him, she saw shadows of his betrayal. She recalled the hush in that clinic room, the betrayal etched into his face as he turned around to see her watching him with another pregnant woman. In her quiet moments, Grace wrestled with an internal war. She had loved Daniel deeply, believed in their joint destiny. But how could she forgive such duplicity? Eventually, logic prevailed over longing. She told herself that the life she envisioned with Daniel was gone, replaced by a harsh new reality. Two unborn children by two different mothers, both fathered by the same man who claimed to love her. Though her heart ached, Grace refused to crumble. She had been raised to face adversity head-on, and now more than ever she felt a fierce determination. If Daniel's betrayal was a storm, she'd be the oak tree that withstood it, rooted in her love for her baby and her own self-respect. For weeks after confronting Daniel at the clinic, Grace lived in a state of suspended reality. The penthouse, once vibrant with warm lights, and the laughter of dinner parties felt like a perpetual twilight zone. She rarely ventured outside, except for her necessary doctor's appointments. Her mother remained in the guest room, quietly fretting over her daughter's condition. The few friends who visited always had the same cautious questions. "How are you holding up? Have you talked with Daniel?" Grace knew they tiptoed around the truth, afraid to reopen her wounds. But no amount of avoidance could erase the undeniable collapse of her marriage. Daniel, for his part, tried to act normal in the penthouse. He would spend hours in his private office, shuffling papers or pacing while on hushed phone calls. Grace assumed these were attempts at damage control for his business. Although her mind still burned with anger and sadness, she lacked the energy to confront him daily. Her focus narrowed to two things: protecting her health and ensuring the baby she carried continued to thrive amid the storm of betrayal. Into this tense standstill came another shock, the sudden visit of the very woman who had shattered Grace's world in a single moment at the clinic. It happened on a particularly cold afternoon in early winter. The sky was a dull grey, and the heaters in the penthouse struggled to chase the chill from its tall hallways. Grace was in the kitchen, forcing down a protein shake, when the doorbell echoed. Expecting a delivery, perhaps some groceries or maternity items, she shuffled to the door, one hand under her belly to support its weight. But when she opened the door, the sight made her heart falter. Standing there, cheeks reddened by the cold, was Catherine Kate Aldridge, the woman Grace had glimpsed in that devastating instant at the clinic. Kate looked uneasy, her eyes flicking around the penthouse corridor as though she half expected Daniel to materialize from the shadows. She was visibly pregnant, wearing a thick sweater that emphasized her growing abdomen. If Grace had to guess, Kate was about as far along as she was. "Hello," Kate said, voice soft but trembling. "I'm sorry to come unannounced. May I come in? It's freezing out here." Grace's instinct was to slam the door. The mere presence of Kate felt like an assault on everything she was trying to piece back together. Her mind screamed that letting Kate in would only intensify her agony. But a pulsing curiosity, and perhaps an unspoken need for answers, rose in Grace. She stepped aside without speaking, allowing Kate to cross the threshold. The main entry of the penthouse stretched out in stylish but muted tones: a plush rug, a contemporary chandelier overhead, and the faint scent of lavender from diffusers. Normally, such a luxurious space projected confidence, but today it felt barren, as if it were an elaborate stage set for the darkest chapter of Grace's life. Kate took off her coat, shaking out the cold. Beneath the thick layer, Grace could see just how pregnant she really was. Her belly looked almost identical in size to Grace's. The realization made Grace's spine tingle with a mix of dread and anger. This woman is carrying Daniel's other child, she thought, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Why are you here?" Grace asked, voice clipped. She didn't invite Kate to sit. She sensed that any false gesture of hospitality would snap her last thread of composure. Kate took a measured breath. I know this must be hard to believe, but I didn't know Daniel was married when we got involved. I only found out after I was pregnant. Grace's jaw tightened. She braced herself with one hand on a small table in the entryway. That's hard to believe, she said coldly. Daniel and I have been to countless events. We're all over the press whenever we do charity work. Did you never look him up online? Did you never once Google the man you were sleeping with? A flicker of shame crossed Kate's face. She glanced down at her boots, still dotted with melting snow. I suppose I should have, but I didn't, not at first. I was taken in by his charm. He claimed he had no real attachments. Later, when I saw a photo of him with you, I confronted him. He said your marriage was basically done, that you were just living together until a separation was final. For a moment, Grace said nothing. Anger roared inside her, urging her to lash out. But deeper than the fury was a kind of terrible exhaustion. She'd spent weeks trying to make sense of Daniel's deception. Hearing Kate's story only confirmed that he'd orchestrated a labyrinth of lies. Let me guess, Grace said quietly. Once you realized he was lying, you were already pregnant. So you decided to keep the baby. Kate nodded, tears threatening to spill. Yes, I won't pretend I'm innocent. I should have seen the signs. But by the time I found out the extent of his dishonesty, I felt trapped. He promised me he would do right by this child. But lately, he's been ignoring my calls and texts. I've had complications, nothing too serious yet, but enough that my doctor insists on regular checkups. Daniel hasn't offered any support. Grace tried to remain expressionless, but it was impossible to hide her revulsion. So Daniel thinks he can juggle two pregnant women at once. That twisted scenario stoked her outrage anew. Why come to me? She demanded, her voice laced with bitterness. What do you expect I can do for you? Kate's posture sagged, as if she'd carried more than the weight of a child. Because you're in a similar situation, pregnant with Daniel's baby, I thought maybe you'd want the truth, that I'm not here to steal him or manipulate him. I just want the financial support he promised. More than that, I want to warn you how good he is at feeding lies. If you still love him, you deserve to know all of it. A shaky laugh escaped Grace. You're warning me? You think I don't already see what he's capable of? She pressed a hand to her belly, protective instincts surging. I'm well aware of how he can twist reality. That doesn't change the fact that you slept with my husband. Tears pooled in Kate's eyes. I never wanted this. If I had known everything, I would have backed away the moment he re-entered my life. But I was caught up in his promises like a fool. The hallway light flickered, casting elongated shadows on the floor. Grace studied Kate's face, hunting for any hint of duplicity. Instead, she found a young woman who looked genuinely broken, someone who had, in her own way, been manipulated by the same charismatic man Grace had once idolized. It didn't excuse Kate's role, but it did humanize her. Grace took a moment to steady her breathing. Let me be clear, she said slowly. If you think I can force Daniel to pay for your child, you're mistaken. That's between you and him. My priority is my baby, protecting this child from stress and heartbreak. Kate took a step closer, tears sliding down her cheeks. I understand. Truly, I'm not asking you to fight my battles. I just wanted to apologize for my part in all this, and to let you know I'm not planning to cling to Daniel. I only reached out because he's ignoring me, and I'm worried about the future. I don't have his resources. I don't come from money. Grace registered the fear in Kate's trembling voice. Memories flooded back. Grace's own father was just a hard-working firefighter, and her mother a dedicated teacher. Grace knew too well what it meant to worry over finances. Still, pity warred with anger. She felt her baby stir inside her, as if the unborn child could sense its mother's tumultuous emotions. After a heavy silence, Grace spoke again, her voice resolute. I'm sorry for your difficulties, But I won't play mediator between you and Daniel. You need a lawyer or a mediator, someone impartial. Understand? Kate nodded, seeming resigned. I do. I only wanted you to know the truth from my side. You have every right to hate me. But if our children end up in each other's lives someday, I'd rather it not be built on more lies. The weight of that statement pressed on Grace. She envisioned a future where two children, half-siblings, might cross paths. Would they resent each other for the sins of their father? Would they ever share a bond? The thought was almost unbearable, yet also strangely poignant. No matter how the adults felt, the children deserved clarity. Grace's grip on the table tightened, her knuckles going white. I don't hate you, she said. At last, her eyes glistening. I hate what Daniel did to both of us. But let's be real, if you'd done a little more digging, maybe we wouldn't be here. Kate dipped her head in acknowledgement. You're right. I take responsibility for my naivety. An ache curled in Grace's chest. She was beyond drained. Every conversation about Daniel's betrayal seemed to strip another layer from her soul. Then we're done here, she said firmly, blinking back tears. I can't handle any more stress. Kate wrapped her arms around herself, as though trying to warm her body from the inside out. I'll see myself out. Moving toward the door, she paused once. I'm truly sorry, Grace. No reply came. Grace stayed rooted to the floor, eyes fixed on a point of the wall. A moment later, the door clicked shut behind Kate. Only the chilly draft remained, along with the pounding of Grace's heart. For several minutes, she remained motionless, grappling with an onslaught of conflicting emotions: anger, pity, betrayal, sympathy. Finally, her legs trembled, forcing her to sit on the bench by the entrance. She pressed both hands to her belly, whispering a promise to her child. I won't let this destroy us. I'll protect you no matter what it takes. Kate's visit had opened a wound that Grace was desperate to keep closed. Hearing the mistress's story only confirmed that Daniel had artfully constructed a web of deception, ensnaring more than one unsuspecting victim. While it vindicated Grace's suspicions, it also drove home a sad truth. Her husband was no longer the man she thought he was. And for that realization, there would be no simple remedy. Eventually, Grace gathered herself enough to head back to the kitchen. Her mother, who had been napping in another room, emerged, eyes clouded with concern. She asked who had visited. Grace simply shook her head, tears threatening again. It was nobody, she murmured, uncertain if she could handle relaying the conversation just yet. As she climbed the stairs to the master bedroom, each step felt heavier, laden with the knowledge that she was sharing her life and now, in a twisted way, her pregnancy with someone else Daniel had also pledged to care for. Yet amid the sorrow, a fierce determination flared. She would not be sidelined by Daniel's infidelity. Neither she nor her child would be reduced to an afterthought in his chaotic double life. That evening, Grace lay wide awake in bed, stroking her rounded belly and wondering if her baby could sense the turmoil swirling around them. The penthouse was silent, except for the hum of the central heating. She realized that, although Kate's presence had shaken her, it had also given her one crucial gift: clarity. No longer could she cling to illusions or half-finished excuses. The scale of Daniel's betrayal was laid bare, and the time had come to decide how she would move forward. Whether that meant standing firmly on her own or wading through a battlefield of legalities and heartbreak, she would not face it passively. Grace gently closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her temple. In the darkness, she felt the baby's gentle kick. In that moment, she almost whispered, "Thank you," thankful that, amidst such pain, she still had a reason to hope. A week after Kate's surprise visit, Grace woke to find Daniel slumped at the kitchen table, looking haggard. Unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes, he seemed decades older. The once confident millionaire, whose presence radiated success, now looked on the brink of collapse. Between sips of black coffee, he confessed that Bennett Innovations was facing serious investor withdrawals. Rumors of his affair had started circulating, and potential partners were spooked by the scandal. He reached for Grace's hand, a gesture that once would have melted her. Now it felt like an assault on her battered emotions. "Grace, can we at least talk?" he asked, voice cracking. "I know I've hurt you, but I need you." She pulled away. "You didn't think about needing me when you were sneaking around with Kate." He closed his eyes, clearly wrestling with regret. "I was an idiot. A weak, selfish idiot. I got caught up in a fantasy. I thought I could fix it before it spiraled, but I've lost control of everything: my company, my reputation, and you." Though her anger surged, Grace's voice remained eerily calm. "That's how karma works, Daniel. It doesn't revolve around your schedule. It hits when you least expect it." He bowed his head, silent tears escaping. For the first time, Grace saw a man who truly understood the gravity of his actions. But empathy didn't rush in. Too much damage had been done. The baby in her womb deserved a stable environment, not one riddled with broken promises. "I met with a lawyer," she stated bluntly. "We're discussing separation and custody. My lawyer will contact yours." Daniel paled. "Please, don't do this. Let's try therapy, or at least talk to me. I'll do whatever it takes to be there for you and the baby." Grace exhaled, tears threatening. "You should have thought about that before. Now, my trust is shattered. You have another child on the way with Kate. You can't pretend that won't affect us." He looked at her with desperate eyes. "I'll provide for Kate's child, but I want you and our baby to be my priority." The hypocrisy stung. "Priority," she barked, a humorless laugh. "That word doesn't mean what you think it does, Daniel. We were supposed to be your priority, but you tossed us aside. Now that your empire is crumbling, you want me back. That's not love. That's damage control." She turned to leave, pausing only to add, "I won't keep you from your child, Daniel. But as for our marriage, that's a different story." Climbing the stairs, Grace felt raw, but also empowered. She had cried so many tears over this betrayal, yet now her sorrow was morphing into a fierce will to stand up for herself and her baby. If Daniel wanted redemption, he'd have to fight for it, and even then, it might not be enough. The next few weeks brought a whirlwind of change. Grace formally filed for legal separation, requesting that Daniel vacate the penthouse while she sorted her life out. A wave of speculation hit the Denver social scene, tabloids hinting at cracks in the golden couple's facade. While Grace's parents shielded her from the worst gossip, she couldn't avoid glimpses of headlines or hearing the hushed murmurs when she ventured outside. Amid this turbulence, Grace clung to routine. She prepared the baby's nursery with items she salvaged: clothes, diapers, a crib. She refused to accept more lavish gifts from Daniel, wanting to assert her independence. Visits to her obstetrician became more frequent as her due date inched closer. Although physically exhausted, she carried herself with a regal composure that surprised even her. One afternoon, while sorting baby clothes, she spotted an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a letter from a private investigator, hired by Daniel's shareholders. It seemed they wanted to verify the timeline of his affair, possibly to use it against him in corporate negotiations. The letter expressed willingness to pay Grace for any incriminating information. Horrified by the intrusion, she tore the paper to shreds. She wanted no part in corporate backstabbing. All she wanted was a fresh start. Amid the chaos, Allison remained a rock. Over late-night cups of chamomile tea, they discussed the future. Grace worried about finances, though Daniel was wealthy. The lawsuit from investors and the potential child support claims from both women might complicate everything. Allison reminded her to rely on the legal system to secure her and the baby's interests. Meanwhile, Daniel scrambled to save face. He issued public statements denying any wrongdoing in his business dealings, even as he privately admitted his affair had caused investor panic. Grace gleaned bits of information from the news and from mutual acquaintances who still had connections to Bennett Innovations. The company was teetering, but not yet collapsed. Every so often, a pang of memory struck Grace, reminding her of the early days, stargazing on the penthouse balcony, planning philanthropic projects, imagining a life free of drama. Those fleeting recollections of happiness made her chest ache. It was a stark lesson in how swiftly illusions can be shattered when built on dishonest foundations. One evening, as Grace was half drifting to sleep, she woke to sharp, stabbing pains in her abdomen. Panicked, she struggled out of bed and fumbled for her phone to call an ambulance. By the time paramedics arrived, she was drenched in sweat, crumpled on the floor, terrified she was losing the baby. At the hospital, Swedish Medical Center in Inglewood, known for its high-risk pregnancy unit, doctors ran tests to ensure the baby was stable. After a tense few hours, they discovered Grace had been experiencing stress-induced contractions. Fortunately, no immediate threat emerged, but she would need close monitoring. News of her hospitalization reached Daniel, who rushed in. Grace was in a dimly lit room, her mother by her side, when he arrived looking frantic. Despite everything, she didn't bar him from entering. He stood awkwardly near the bed, his eyes red, rimmed with fear. "Grace, are you all right? Is the baby okay?" Too exhausted to argue, she nodded slightly. "The baby's fine, thanks to the doctors." He swallowed hard, guilt etched into every line of his face. "I'm sorry this is happening. I never wanted you to go through so much stress." She closed her eyes, waves of fatigue washing over her. "It's a bit late for that." Though the tension was palpable, Daniel quietly stayed by her bedside through the night. Her mother observed from a corner chair, protective but equally drained. At one point, Grace drifted into a restless sleep, only to stir and see Daniel softly murmuring to her belly, as though apologizing to the unborn child. By morning, the doctors deemed Grace stable enough to be released with strict instructions for bed rest and minimal stress. "Easier said than done," Grace muttered under her breath. She agreed to move back to her parents' house in a quieter suburb until after the baby was born. The penthouse and all its complicated memories were too overwhelming. Realizing the severity of her condition, Daniel pressed a set of keys into Grace's mother's hands. "Take my car," he said, referring to the Tesla parked in the hospital lot. "Get her home safely. I'll arrange everything else." Grace watched him warily. It was the first selfless gesture she had witnessed in a long time. Though her heart softened an inch, her guard remained firmly intact. She returned to the suburban house where she grew up, ironically feeling safer in that humble environment than in any marble-tiled mansion Daniel had ever purchased. In the weeks that followed, Grace found a modest rhythm in her parents' home. She took short, careful walks around the block, sipped herbal tea in the kitchen, and prepared for the baby's arrival with the help of her mother and Allison. Each day felt like a balancing act, keep the stress at bay to protect her unborn child, while simultaneously grappling with the heartbreak and legal complexities that hovered over her like a dark cloud. Daniel visited occasionally, always treading cautiously. He brought groceries, asked about Grace's health, and read up on infant care. On a few occasions, he brought updates about his ongoing fiasco. Bennett Innovations was on the brink, and he was liquidating certain assets to keep the company afloat. He offered to settle finances in a way that would ensure Grace and the baby had everything they needed, an attempt, perhaps, to show atonement. Slowly, a faint civility emerged between them. Grace was far from forgiving him, but she no longer bristled every time he entered the room. She recognized that her child deserved a father, even if her marriage was beyond salvaging. Whenever Daniel brought baby essentials, Grace accepted them with polite thanks. Her mother occasionally caught glimpses of Daniel's haunted expression, perhaps a man realizing only too late the true cost of betrayal. During one quiet afternoon, Grace found Daniel standing in the living room, gazing at an old family photo of her parents. He turned to her with an almost childlike vulnerability. "I really admire your mum and dad. The stability they share, it's what I wanted for us." She stifled a bitter smile. "That's what I wanted too." They stood in silence, the unsaid truth heavy between them. Grace saw in Daniel's eyes a flicker of regret, but regret alone wouldn't mend her shattered heart. Still, she felt an odd surge of compassion. She remembered the man she had fallen in love with, the driven philanthropist, with a smile that lit up her world. Was he gone entirely, or buried under layers of guilt? A phone buzz interrupted them. Daniel glanced at his screen, face tightening. Grace caught the name Kate flashing. She stiffened. "Are you still talking to her?" He looked torn. "She's due soon. She has some complications, might deliver early." "I have to be there for that baby, Grace." A pang struck her chest. Once again, the harsh reality of his dual fatherhood loomed. Grace swallowed past the lump in her throat and nodded. "Then go," she said, her voice strained. "Your child needs you." Daniel left, murmuring a soft goodbye. Leaning against the wall, Grace felt tears burn her eyes. Compassion warred with heartbreak. She understood that a child, any child, deserved both parents, if possible. But the unchangeable truth remained. She was forced to share the father of her unborn baby with another woman, another child conceived in deceit. If that wasn't a harsh lesson in karma, she didn't know what was. The final weeks of Grace's pregnancy were tense. She was on edge, half expecting her stress levels to spike again. But her mother and Allison provided a calm environment, her father too, ensuring that she had everything she needed. Grace practiced breathing exercises, read pregnancy books, and tried to mentally prepare for the day she would bring her baby into a broken home. The day arrived unexpectedly. It was late evening, and Grace was in the kitchen preparing a cup of warm milk when a sharp contraction doubled her over. Realizing she was in labor, her mother scrambled to call an ambulance. They rushed to the hospital, checking Grace into the maternity ward. Nurses recognized her from her previous scare and offered comforting smiles. Amid deep contractions, Grace found herself craving Daniel's presence, if only to see the father of her child at such a pivotal moment. Unsure of what Grace wanted, her mother discreetly texted him. Daniel arrived, breathless, a half-hour later. He stood awkwardly at the doorway, unsure if Grace wanted him by her side. She met his gaze, tears welling in her eyes. In this vulnerable moment, she simply nodded. Whatever else he had done, he was still the baby's father, and she was about to traverse the most challenging journey her body had ever endured. Over the next several hours, Grace fought through waves of pain. Her contractions intensified, each one prompting breathless moans and beads of sweat trickling down her brow. Daniel held her hand, whispering words of encouragement. Her mother stood on the other side, stroking her hair. For a flicker of time, Grace felt a semblance of unity, a reminder of how things might have been under different circumstances. Finally, amid gut-wrenching cries, Grace brought a beautiful baby girl into the world. The nurses placed the newborn on Grace's chest, and in that radiant moment, all the anguish, betrayal, and conflict seemed to pause. The baby's cries resonated with life's raw power. Grace wept with overwhelming love, pressing a tender kiss to her daughter's forehead. Daniel stood beside her, tears in his own eyes. Their daughter was a reminder of innocence and hope, even in the face of heartbreak. Though physically drained, Grace felt a surge of euphoria. The next hours drifted in a haze of medical checks, feedings, and cooing over the perfect new life. But as dawn approached and the adrenaline subsided, Grace's complicated reality seeped back in. She had a child with a man she no longer trusted, who was also about to father another baby with someone else. Still, in that hospital room, she clung to the miracle in her arms. Maybe the future would be difficult, maybe forgiveness was out of reach, but as she gazed into her daughter's tiny face, she vowed to protect and love her fiercely, no matter what storms awaited them. Leaving the hospital, Grace returned to her parents' house with the baby, whom she named Ava Elise Bennett. Swaddled in pastel blankets, Ava seemed to radiate contentment, oblivious to the adult conflicts swirling around her. Grace settled into a new routine, sleepless nights, frequent feedings, and the tender marvel of holding a newborn life that depended on her for everything. Daniel visited occasionally, bearing gifts and timidly asking to hold his daughter. Each time he seemed more subdued. His once cocky grin was replaced by cautious humility. Grace allowed him these visits, mindful that Ava shouldn't suffer for her father's sins. Yet she kept a wary distance. The memory of his betrayal was still fresh. News arrived that Kate had gone into premature labor. Daniel rushed to her side, spending days at the hospital as their baby boy fought to stabilize in the NICU. Grace couldn't help feeling a strange ache at the thought of her husband, though estranged, sitting vigil for another newborn. The dual fatherhood scenario was painfully real now. Ava and that baby boy were half-siblings, forever linked by Daniel's choices. Meanwhile, Bennett Innovations finally collapsed under mounting investor lawsuits. With scandal overshadowing any product success, the company declared bankruptcy. Daniel's lavish lifestyle, once the envy of many, evaporated. He sold properties, parted with fancy cars, and took a modest apartment to salvage what little financial cushion he had left. Some might call it poetic justice, others pure karma. Grace watched from the sidelines, neither gloating nor offering pity. She was too focused on caring for Ava and rebuilding her life to be consumed by his downfall. But if Daniel's downfall was severe, Kate's plight was equally troubling. The medical bills for a premature baby escalated, and though Daniel tried to cover the costs, his finances were in free fall. Through a strange twist of compassion, Grace found herself texting Kate one evening, "How's the baby?" She told herself she was doing it for AVA's sake, to keep tabs on her daughter's half-sibling. Kate replied with cautious gratitude, explaining that her son was stable but needed continuous care. The women, bound by heartbreak, began a sporadic exchange of updates about the babies, forging a fragile truce neither had anticipated. While the outside world might have seen a soap opera of betrayal and financial ruin, Grace found solace in simpler victories. Ava's first smile, the tender ways her parents doted on their grandchild, the relief of regaining her emotional footing step by step. She might have lost her illusions, but she gained a clear sense of purpose. Daniel, for his part, faced a reckoning unlike anything he had anticipated. He had not only lost Grace's trust and his company, but he also realized that juggling two families, one that barely tolerated him, was a far cry from the glamorous image he once cultivated. The child support and medical expenses piled up. Public sympathy was scarce, with many calling him the architect of his own downfall. To Grace, it felt as if cosmic forces had aligned to deliver a brutal lesson. Betrayal, greed, and deception do not go unpunished forever. The life Daniel had built on half-truths was now crumbling. Still, as her grandmother used to say, the darkest nights often reveal the brightest stars. For Grace, that star was Ava, a shining testament that love and determination could outlast even the fiercest storms. Months passed, and Grace quietly adapted to single motherhood. She returned to freelancing in marketing small projects she could handle from home while caring for Ava. With the help of her parents, she found a modest townhouse where she could carve out an independent life. Surrounded by baby toys and soft lullabies, she discovered a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. There were still moments of sorrow, memories that stabbed her heart. But the constant presence of Ava's innocent smile reminded her that life did go on and could be beautiful again. During this period, Daniel reached out regularly, hoping to be part of Ava's life. At first, Grace offered guarded cooperation, letting him see their daughter under supervised visits. To her surprise, he remained consistent, never missing a scheduled time. Though he was far from wealthy now, he did what he could, buying diapers, formula, and saving scraps of money for Ava's future. One afternoon, Grace caught sight of Daniel playing peek-a-boo with Ava, both of them erupting in giggles. That scene tugged at her heart. Despite her anger, she recognized that Daniel loved his child. Trust was another matter. Rebuilding trust would require more than fatherly gestures. It demanded proof of deep, lasting change. Whether Daniel could rise to that challenge remained to be seen. Kate and her baby boy remained in precarious circumstances, but Daniel managed partial support for them as well. Through text messages, Kate and Grace shared the occasional milestone. Slowly they formed an uneasy camaraderie born from necessity. If the children were half-siblings, they deserved at least an honest chance to know each other someday. By the time Ava was nearly a year old, Grace felt a renewed sense of self-worth. She had weathered heartbreak, legal battles, and the crushing weight of betrayal. In the process, she discovered an inner fortitude that no one, not even Daniel, could take away. She also began to let go of bitterness. She'd always believed that forgiveness, at its core, was more about freeing herself than exonerating the one who caused her pain. On a crisp morning, Grace took Ava for a walk in the neighborhood, relishing the bright leaves and gentle breeze. When Ava babbled happily, Grace looked down with tearful gratitude. She could not change what Daniel had done or erase the chapters of heartbreak, but she could choose how to live the next chapters of her life with dignity, wisdom, and unconditional love for her daughter. For Daniel, karma had indeed struck hard, shattering his facade of invincibility. Yet, in that shattering, there was a glimmer of redemption if he chose to seize it. For Grace, though, the path forward was lit by her own independence. She had discovered that the hardest trials often reveal unimagined strength. And so she walked on, Ava clutched close to her heart, ready for the next chapter of her life, a chapter defined not by betrayal, but by resilience and hope. Thank you for joining us in this emotional journey of heartbreak, deception, and hard-earned redemption. From the moment Grace stepped into that clinic, her world turned upside down, yet through every betrayal and unexpected twist, she stood firm for the sake of her unborn child. Meanwhile, Daniel's duplicity showcased that even wealth can't shield anyone from the consequences of reckless choices. As the dust settled, both Grace and Kate found inner strength they never knew they possessed, proving that even in tragedy, life can blossom anew. If this story stirred your emotions or made you reflect on the power of resilience, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every click helps us continue creating more powerful stories that resonate deep within the heart. Thank you for watching and supporting our storytelling. Stay tuned for more dramatic tales and unforgettable lessons on love, life, and the indomitable human spirit.